Okay, I really want you to think about these 16 principles and provide a report, maybe a 20 minutes report on understanding these principles and how do you apply to your work environment. Lean supply chain principle 1. Improving the performance of every subsystem in isolation will not improve system performance. Improvement in subsystem performance must be gauged only through their impact on the whole system. Focus on improving the performance of the lean supply chain. Focus on this, but do not ignore the supply chain business ecosystem. See what happened to Gateway Computer. See what happened to Dell. Look at the good days of Dell and bad days of Dell. And then what happened to Apple. Time lost at a bottleneck resource result in the loss of output of the total system. Time saved on not bottleneck resource is a mirage. So the whole idea is go to a system, find the bottleneck, and then focus all your time and effort and budget on relaxing the bottleneck. When you relax the bottleneck goes somewhere else, and then you need to go after the next bottleneck. Decisions should be based on throughput world perspective. We cannot focus our philosophy on cost reduction, instead on improving throughput. So we try to decrease inventory, we try to decrease operating expenses, but these all follow our first attempts, which is increasing throughput. After we increase throughput, then we think about reducing inventory, and then after everything is fixed, then we may go after reducing operating expenses. Focus on customer needs and process requirements, process capabilities, process shortcoming, and also look at firms that are similar to you, and sometimes firms that have similarities to you but are in a different industry. Try to benchmark their best practices. Maximize external variety with minimal internal variety. Starbucks has few raw material, but you can ask for thousands of different products. Postpone making changes in inventory as long as possible. One of the key concepts that we discuss is postponement. Indeed, one of the key concepts that we will discuss is mass customization. And then mass customization is product of three things: variability in demand, cross-training of workforce, and postponement. I will have a short lecture on mass customization, and I will go through some simulation and linear programming models for cross-training and for postponement. So we need to have a product and processes that have capability to cope with changes in customer preferences. We cannot have a rigid automation system which is targeted towards something specific, because then as soon as there is a little bit change in customer preferences, our system will break down. Design of product and creation of processes should support strategic flexibility to produce a variety of product if needed at different volumes. There is a variability in demand. We cannot do much about it. Usually we fill it. We cope with it through inventory. When demand is low, we produce a lot of product and put it in inventory for when demand goes up. This may be good for commodity products that do not show that much variability. But for products that are too variable, perhaps a better strategy is to have safety capacity, not safety inventory and not seasonal inventory. Safety capacity is what Zara does. they do have extra capacity, and that enable them to put new product on shelves in 3 to 4 weeks. Do not focus just on low-cost suppliers. Develop long-term partnership with them, not just to increase your own profit, but to increase supply chain surplus. What is supply chain surplus? Is the value of the product for customer minus the cost for the supply chain. Focus on improving throughput, not reducing cost. You can also think about reducing cost, but always have a throughput word perspective. What can happen in cost word? In cost word, we can reduce costs. Suppose we are 100% successful and we reduce cost to 0. So cost was 100, we reduced it to 0. 100 units improvement. But what if we could have increased our sales by 100%, 200%, 300%? Furthermore, do not forget, when we reduce costs, we take it out of the pocket of the employees. So if we reduce cost to 0, that means no one gets a salary from our company. And therefore, no one has purchasing power. No one who works for our company has a purchasing power. That is why we need to develop a throughput perspective. For planning, we may use forecasts or expectation of demand. For execution, we need to move towards demand, not forecast of demand. Because if we produce based on demand, we observe less variability compared to when just we produce based on the forecast. Try to reduce variability in everything. Variability finally is translated into costs, unnecessary costs. Salaries and wages are not unnecessary costs. They are increasing the purchasing power of our people. But producing product and not having a demand for it, that would be unnecessary increasing cost. Focus on the bottleneck. Synchronize the system by a drum played by the bottleneck. Instead of line balancing, make sure that every station has up to almost its capacity load. Instead of that, focus on creating a smooth flow, synchronizing the flow. Indeed, creating a smooth flow should be the main objective of all supply chains. When you have a project, focus on completing the project, not completing a task. Because you may complete 90% of tasks and still the project takes twice of the time that you need to complete it. It is the end of the project, which is end of the project, not end of a task, end of an activity. And then when you add buffer, add to the end of the project, not to each individual activity. Condense each activity time as much as you can, as much as reasonable, and then add a buffer at the end of the project to allow activities to have time more than what you initially have assumed. Reduce multitasking. Multitasking means you do an activity, leave it at the middle, go to the second, go to the third, come back to the first, go to the second, go to the third. Therefore, all activities take a long time to get completed. So we will have a full class discussion on these 16 principles of lean supply chain by using the theory of constraint.